You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the row over North Sea oil continues as the government's position on issuing new licences is branded indefensible. From discarded tents to glitter face paint, we're looking at the climate impact of festivals and turning crisp packets into school desks in South Africa. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show. With just weeks to go until the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, the government is at the centre of an increasingly heated row over drilling for fossil fuels in UK waters. The Scottish Green Party, whose leaders could become ministers in Holyrood if a deal with the SNP is approved tomorrow, claim allowing the extraction of new oil and gas in the North Sea is, quote, downright dangerous. They say there are alternatives, as our climate correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter reports.
We're in the North Sea off the coast of Scotland, manoeuvring in challenging conditions to get a closer look at a floating wind turbine. The UK gets around a quarter of its energy from wind, and these are a new tool in the push for even more.
We can see here we've got a great wind resource, a great water depth, for example, to develop offshore floating winds. Fixed bottom, we see limitations around the 40-metre water depth mark, approximately. The limitation for a floating turbine is 800 metres water depth.
They are a feat of engineering, but only part of the story. The UK is a world leader in wind power, but out here the reality is a little bit more complicated than that. And that's because underneath the North Sea there are still billions of barrels of oil, and for the moment at least we are set on extracting them. And as the climate crisis intensifies, so does the political row, symbolised by an oil field called Cambo that's due to receive final government approval for extraction to begin. The Scottish Green Party, newly powerful after a recent election, is outraged.
The UK government's position to continue oil and gas extraction in the North Sea, to issue new licences, is not defensible. It isn't compatible with our countries signing the Paris Agreement. Boris Johnson is being more than negligent. I think he's being downright dangerous. It is dangerous to continue on the path that we are on. Millions of lives are at risk. You thought living through a pandemic was bad? You haven't lived through the breakdown of your biosphere yet.
The UK government doesn't see it that way.
Whether we export some of that oil and gas or it's for our own use, much better to have access to that oil and gas on our doorstep and under our control.
So are you saying that the UN and the International Energy Agency are wrong when they say that new oil and gas extraction is incompatible with hitting global emissions targets?
What I'm saying is the UK government's targets for net zero by 2050 already takes into account licensed oil and gas fields, not yet sanctioned for extraction.
Whatever the explanation, campaigners say this issue threatens the moral authority of the British government. Just weeks away from hosting a crucial UN climate change summit in Glasgow, that is something it can ill afford to lose. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News, in the northeast of Scotland.
And if you want to see a real-time breakdown of where electricity in Great Britain is coming from, just head to our website, skynews.com/climate. Now, in today's other climate news, public concern about climate change has reached record levels in Britain, putting it second only to the pandemic as a key worry. Ipsos Mori found 32% of people put climate change, the environment and pollution down as a major issue in Britain, double the number of last month. 5 projects that will restore over 8,000 hectares of peatland across England have been announced by the government. Cornwall and Yorkshire are among the areas that will benefit from the scheme. Peatlands store carbon, but the UK's are so damaged that 23 million tonnes of carbon dioxide are released every year. And organisers have announced that the Queen will be attending the COP26 climate conference. The event is due to take place in Glasgow this November after being postponed last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The summit will bring together heads of governments, business leaders, activists and scientists. Extinction Rebellion have caused disruption in London on a fifth day of mass protests, with activists marching through the City of London. The environmental group says it wants banks and institutions to stop funding fossil fuel projects. We've heard a lot about Extinction Rebellion over the past week, but who are they and what do they stand for?
If I was to just stand here with a placard, people would just walk by and nobody's interested. You have to create a disruption to create the conversation.
And on this week's episode of Climate Cast, we examine whether Extinction Rebellion's controversial tactics have helped their cause. That's out now wherever you get your podcasts. Well, it is the August bank holiday weekend, and that can only mean one thing: festivals. Reading and Leeds, Creamfields, All Points East and Carfest are just some of the events taking place over the next 3 days. And with so much focus on the climate crisis, many organisers are working to improve their sustainability. So how do festivals impact the environment? Well, according to a Greener Festival, the average festival goer travels 144 miles just to get there. In 2019, more than half travelled to festivals by either car or plane. Travelling to and from sites tends to make up the most of a festival's carbon footprint, accounting for 80% of the sector's total emissions. So what makes up the rest? Well, almost 2 kilograms of waste per person per day is generated by those at camping festivals. That drops to less than a kilo at non-camping events. The average festival uses 2,762 cubic metres of water, almost 3 million litres. All these factors, from the travel to electricity, fuel, waste and water, mean the average carbon footprint for a festival is 2,299 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Well, with me now is Claire O'Neill. She's the co-founder of A Greener Festival, which helps events, festivals and venues around the world to become more sustainable. Claire, thank you so much for talking to us. So how easy is it for these events to become more sustainable?
There are some things that are definitely easy wins, but in many cases, we really depend upon the macro environment that we exist in. So, for example, what are the transport networks? What are the waste facilities that we can use? What are the energy resources that are available? The good news is that we have been working on this subject for decades at this stage, and the technologies are really advancing to help festivals to be more sustainable. So, for example, we have batteries that can help to supplement generators, reducing fuel. We have more discussions happening to create installations of renewable energy, such as solar power, that can then connect back to mains, or indeed connecting festivals directly to mains power as well, which really helps not only with not burning fuel on site, but also not transporting equipment to the site as well.
And is there an appetite for these festivals, for these events to become more sustainable?
Unquestionably, and it's from every avenue as well. We have the audiences, this is what the audiences want. All of the festival organisers, we are all individuals. All of us want to be more sustainable ultimately. We can see what's happening with our environment. We can see the problems that we have with waste, the problems that we have with consumption of fossil fuels that are driving the climate crisis and changing our weather before our eyes. So we have every individual almost on board with the project. Additionally, we've just recently had the DCMS from the department from the government who deal with arts and culture and media, who are saying that we must start to incorporate environmental requirements into licensing for events. And these are very clear signals that we need to implement sustainability and have greener festivals greener events of all types, but equally it's a joined up approach. So we need to be giving the right messages to the audience so that we as an entire society can actually improve our sustainability.
Is it expensive for an event to be greener?
In some ways, yes, because it may be that there's upfront investments into whether that's new technology or additional resources of people and staff and expertise. But in the long term, really, what we're looking at to be more sustainable is to stop wasting resources. So whether that's materials, whether it's reducing the cleanup bills because there's less waste to dispose of, whether it's reducing water, reducing fuel, reducing energy, ultimately that's going to save money in the long run, as well as saving our environment and ultimately our health. So there are upfront costs, but there are also ways that you can make big savings today. For instance, by reducing how much fuel is consumed, by really knowing how much power you need to run the stages and the event site.
Okay, Claire, thank you so much for talking to us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, in the latest in our series of Climate Diaries, we're hearing from Solving 7. The female-led NGO has come up with an innovative new way to use single-use plastics, which would normally go to landfill, by turning crisp packets into school desks.
We learned that number 7 plastic doesn't get collected. The waste pickers will collect a plastic bottle. There'll be a packet of crisps or an empty food package right next to it, and they will not collect it. There's no value to it for them. They have no one to sell it onto. No one buys it. It doesn't get recycled. We then take the raw material and we give it to another company that is able to process it into planks, which is then assembled into desks and delivered to the schools. Children that receive a dedicated writing surface can improve their educational outcomes by up to 20%.
Well, that's everything from us this week, but don't forget you can watch our digital show on Snapchat and Sky News IGTV. In the latest episode, we go behind the scenes of our correspondent Adam Parsons' coverage of the devastating floods in Germany last month. Anna Jones will be back with a new extended climate show from Monday, the 6th of September. Thank you for watching.